Alright guys, so we're going to try out the first game here with this very cool 3-color Teachings deck. Opening hand was pretty good, I guess. You have 2 lands, which is great, but they are both mountains, and those are your least, and one of the least important colors, I would say. Blue obviously is going to be first and foremost. Even getting a grotto would, I think, be better than a mountain. Just to give you some options to get into things like the Edict here. Fortunately for us, we are still going to at least get an option to, at the worst case scenario, play that Prism on turn 2. Opponent was playing a Tortured Existence deck. Very cool. This was a black-green one, and we haven't seen those in quite a while. Also, kind of an interesting take on it. Some interesting choices here, such as Grizzly Salvage, something that I think is definitely underrated and could be a much more important card. Had a lot of utility. I thought it was very cool. Let's just move this out of the way here real quick. Alright, so you can see it's going to get quite bigger. Let's move it all the way down. There we go. So opening hand there, you know, when you go first, you're in kind of an interesting situation here because you might be inclined to just throw out that firebolt on that first turn just because you have nothing else really to play. I kind of held back a little bit because I wasn't sure. We are playing a lot of aggro in Pauper these days, so I was going to hold it back and see if maybe there was an early drop creature. I had been facing quite a lot of other things. I've been playing a lot of other decks currently in the casual room here, and seeing quite a lot of aggro things coming around those first turn plays can be a little bit brutal these days. So I was holding back, hoping that it was aggro. Because it was not, it makes it seem like a less effective play. You'll see it gets even worse, but definitely at least could have thrown out a firebolt there, especially, you know, I draw into more here as the game progresses. So Prism going to go out here first and foremost just to fill up my hand, trying to get into other things. As you see with the graveyard here, he is running the Crushers and has a lot of opportunity to get those into play, so we have to kind of keep an eye for the point in time when he does hit 8 lands, because those will be coming down, and these Edicts will be very important. There are only 2 in the deck, but we do at least have some opportunity to recur them with the wall. Drawn to a Mana Leak here, which is great. It gives us a little bit more utility in the early game for counter as opposed to the Power Sink. So we're going to definitely be happy to see that. Unfortunately, he does get a pretty good draw here with the Secure Drive Elders. A really great addition here. It's going to give him opportunity to really build up his mana base. You see he did use the Tortured Existence there, discarding the Brown Scale and getting himself back the Elder, so he's going to be able to get yet another land. Works really great in this deck because it's going to allow him to constantly build up his mana base and pretty much ensure that he does not miss a drop. Did have a second one in hand there. Could have tried to counter it there, probably a misplay on my part. It's kind of an odd thing though, because with the abilities of Tortured Existence, a really strong card, and even if you counter off a spell and it's a creature and it goes to your grave, it's still going to be able to come back thanks to this effect. Also got a lot of great opportunity for him here with the life gain off of the Brown Scale. So get a 4th land, throw that down. The Elders are obviously going to be searching up things. A lot of opportunity. I think perhaps I was not playing this to the best of my ability because I did have opportunities still to be throwing out Firebolts. I left him back because I was a little bit worried about Crushers. And I think at this point it was still too early to be concerned about the Crusher because he does not have the land available to do it. So it was something I probably should not have been so concerned over. Elder's going to come down, and he's going to attempt to remove the Prism. In response here, I am simply going to Edict it off because it would take me 2 Firebolts to finish that off. Like I said, it's kind of a risky thing because I do want to save those for Crushers later on. However, I do not have a lot of chances to do it beyond that first one if I do not find the wall. Drawn to Nightscape Familiar, definitely unfortunate for me because I did lose the Prism and I do not have any other ways to get black mana going. End of his turn here, I could at the very least throw out a Teachings if I have nothing specific to find. You see here he is finally at that point where he's getting like a turn away. He's got the Elder in play. He's going to get his 8 mana. But at the very least you can always throw out the Teachings to find another Teachings just to thin out your deck a little bit. So you see here, that is the choice I made, mostly because of the fact that I do not have any additional black mana. If I had a way to make black mana, then getting an Edict would be more beneficial to me, but because I did not. The only benefit I'm going to find here is, even though he is at this point where he does not have a lot of mana, or he does have the mana available to cast the Crusher, 1 card in hand means he has very little chance that it is a creature. But what what you might not understand, what's really great about this deck, is that even if he does not have a card in hand on his draw, he can use the Dredge ability on the brown scale, and that gives him basically a card to throw away to Tortured Existence every time. Something that I think people who have not played a lot of Tortured do not understand. It is definitely not an easy part to deal with. Interesting choice there. He throws away the Spore Frog he had in hand to get himself a Mold Shambler, and I think he was mostly looking to keep me off of lands, but I think it was kind of a silly play. He could have gone for the Crusher. Either way, I would have been able to Mana Leak it and prevent it from happening. And it's just, this game is actually pretty well over because of the fact that I'm not hitting my land drops, and that's one of the big concerns that I have with this deck in this form, is that you can run into several games I had that, while testing it out, that I had to mulligan down to 4 or 5 cards in hand just to find a second land in an opening hand, and I think it really kind of puts me off. I do have, like I said, some misplays. I think I was not being aggressive at all with these Firebolts. It's very hard to do as well because these are only hitting for 2, and that's going to be simply canceled out with the brown scale. But this game is definitely, I think, even over at this point in time, even if I play it through, because he has so many opportunities here. You see Crypt Rats now in his graveyard. He can get those back with Teachings. It's really actually, I'm sorry, get those back with Tortured Existence. It's really kind of a great deck because you get a lot of utility. It works a lot like a Teachings toolbox, but with the Teachings decks, you know, I talked about the blue-black one before. What they tend to do is they look into the deck to find the pieces that they need, and what this Tortured Existence Reanimator deck tends to do is it's going to look to its graveyard to find the pieces it needs, and the pieces are usually going to be creatures as opposed to a Teachings deck, where obviously they are going to be instants. So getting Stagger Shock here, I figured I would at least try and do some burn damage. I was starting to realize that, hey, I'm not using these Firebolts very effectively. Maybe I should be making a little bit more effort. He is going to finally use the Tortured here to get the Crusher back and attempt to play it. Thankfully, I do have Power Sink, and he has to tap out to play that. What it's going to at least let me do is leave mana open to not only counter it, but throw out the Stagger Shock as well. Let's just move that out of the way here. Not going to be a lot of help. Like I said, again, this is not a burn deck per se. This works a lot in a similar way to some of the post decks that we've seen. Things like even Fissure Post, where the finisher is not in the Temporal Fissure, but is in fact in the little damage that gets through with the flyers. So, you know, in order to win this game, I need actually creatures on the board to be attacking every turn. I'm not going to be able to win this simply off of burn spells. While we do get a lot of utility off of the card advantage that is created through not only the flashback here on the Firebolts, but also the rebound ability on the Stagger Shock, it's still not going to be enough to basically cancel out what life he is gaining every turn off of the brown scale here. So finally drawn to a Muldrifter, this is going to at least give me an opportunity to find more land. I am starting to get to a point where I really should have been turns ago. This is turn 10 and I'm only hitting land number 7, which is definitely disappointing. But we're going to at least keep going and play it out, even though, as I said, this game is pretty well over anyways. He has an opportunity here. You'll see he's going to abuse the brown scale real quick, but he actually has an opportunity to just replay this Crusher every turn. Even though I countered it there, he has the ability, because of the Dredge on the brown scale, to every turn return the Crusher and replay it, and this game would have been over, I think, a lot sooner if he had decided to do that. What you'll see here is he's actually going to abuse the brown scale. He gets a second in hand, and that creates basically a loop where he can discard one and return the other. Discard, return. For every black mana he has, he's going to basically be gaining 2 life, which is pretty abusive, and one of the reasons that the black-green deck used to be very successful. So he's going to gain a ton of life. Like I said, this game was over pretty much anyways, but it does put me way out of any possibility of making a comeback here. What burn I do have is not going to be enough, and he still, you see, has plenty of mana to not only gain that obsessive amount of life, but replay the Crusher as well. So this game is over. I decided I was just going to attack through. I was going to draw some extra cards, see if maybe I could find the Edict. It's really the only thing that would save me here, and that would again only be temporary because I do not have an option to remove his graveyard, so he can just continue to return it. Only one black mana source here with the Shimmering Grotto. so I'm not going to be able to use the teachings to find it unless I had more black, which I do finally find. However, the teaching is going to cost 6 the flashback, in addition to the 2 it would cost to play that. So returns the Crypt Rats, which is a great move by him. I had at least an opportunity there to get rid of the Crusher with the land that I had drawn, this swamp here. But by getting back that Crypt Rats, he clears off the Mulldrifters, and now to this Annihilator ability, I'm going to have to remove 2 lands, and that puts it way out of reach, and this game is over. So I just decided I would throw out my burn just to show what I had in hand. Definitely a bit of a frustrating game, but I think it does a decent job of illustrating kind of the issues that this deck has with mana. It does want to run a little bit short on land because of all the fact familiars and the electromancers and how they reduce the mana cost, but at the same time you can run into some really tough starts, so you got to be careful with that. When this deck gets on point, it can do some really fun things. However, it can run into quite a few mana issues.